Not all silences are born from peace. Some silences arrive like warnings, pulling at your chest before your mind even understands why. That afternoon, under the fierce African sun, I felt it for the first time. The red earth shimmered with heat. Traders shouted prices like warriors fighting for survival. Children ran barefoot chasing goats through clouds of dust, and drums pounded from the far end of the street. The market was alive, noisy, wild, unrestrained. And then, in the middle of all that life, I saw her. A woman, frail, bent forward as though her bones no longer trusted her flesh. Upon her head sat a woven basket that seemed far too heavy for her thin frame. She staggered, knees trembling, lips pressed tight as sweat poured down her face. A few grains of maize spilled over the side and fell into the dust, and laughter rose from the crowd. "Look at her!" one man selling cola nuts shouted. "She cannot even carry her own food." Children giggled. A group of women smirked but turned away. And the woman, she said nothing. Not a cry for help, not a plea for mercy. Her silence burned hotter than the sun itself. I don't know why it struck me so deeply. In that market, suffering was common. People collapsed from hunger. Old women begged at the corners. Children fought over scraps. I had seen it 1,000 times. But something about her silence, her dignity in the face of mockery, pulled at me. Her dress was dull brown, patched so many times the original fabric was lost beneath layers of stitches. Her scarf, frayed at the edges, slipped down to reveal hair streaked with dust. Her sandals were little more than broken soles, tied with twine. By all appearances, she was just another poor woman carrying her load through the marketplace. But her hands betrayed her story. When she reached up to steady the basket, her fingers showed themselves. Long, slender, elegant. These were not the hands of a woman who had spent her life bending over fields or scrubbing floors. No, these were hands that once belonged to something greater. A teacher, perhaps, or a woman of standing. It unsettled me. And then she stumbled again. The basket tilted dangerously, and the crowd laughed louder. My chest tightened. My body moved before my mind could argue. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring their jeers. "Mama," I called softly, "let me help you." She flinched at my voice, her eyes flashing toward me. For the first time, I saw them clearly. They were not the eyes of a beggar. They were deep, sharp, unyielding. For a heartbeat, I felt as if those eyes looked through me, stripping away my skin, my doubts, my entire being. Before she could speak, I lifted the basket from her head and swung it onto my shoulder. The weight almost crushed me. My knees bent under it, my muscles screamed, and for a terrifying moment I thought I might collapse right there in the dust. It was far heavier than it looked, impossibly so, as if it held not just cassava and maize, but secrets buried in stone. The crowd erupted in laughter again, now directed at me. "Look at him!" the cola nut seller roared. "The boy carries a beggar's burden." A group of young men clapped their hands, mocking me, but I shut my ears. I clenched my jaw, steadied my legs, and began to walk beside her. She said nothing. Not a thank you, not even a word of protest. She simply straightened her back and walked, and I followed, carrying the basket as the market eyes burned into my back. The noise around us faded. I no longer heard the bargaining voices, the laughter, the pounding drums. All I heard was the sound of my own labored breathing and the steady shuffle of her feet in the dust. We walked together through the lanes of the market. Every step I took, I felt the weight digging deeper into my shoulder, pressing into my bones. Yet strangely, I refused to stop. Something about that woman's presence, about the way she carried herself despite her rags, made me determined to keep going. At one point, I dared to ask, "Why didn't anyone else help you?" My voice was hoarse, my throat dry with dust. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. A sound escaped her, low and strange, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh, but she did not answer. We turned a corner, leaving the crowded stalls behind. The noise of the market fell away, replaced by the quiet murmur of the wind brushing against clay-walled houses. My body begged me to drop the basket, but my pride forced me forward. I couldn't show weakness now, not before her, not before those eyes that seemed to see everything. Finally, she stopped. Her sudden stillness startled me, and I lowered the basket carefully to the ground. My arms tingled, my muscles numb with relief. For the first time, she straightened fully, her back tall, her face lifted toward the blazing sky. It was as if she had shed more than the basket, as if she had shed the disguise of fragility itself. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words never came. She turned to me, her cracked lips parting, and in a voice low but clear, she spoke my name. The sound struck like a drumbeat in the hollow of my chest. The world froze. Traders stopped mid-call. Children stared wide-eyed. Even the goats fell silent. No stranger should have known my name. Yet she had spoken it with certainty. And in that instant, I realized I hadn't just lifted her basket. I had lifted the first stone of a destiny that was waiting to crush me. Names have power. And when she spoke mine, it was as if the earth itself paused. Traders froze mid-sail, women fetching water stopped mid-step, and even boater riders slowed their bicycles in the dust. A silence spread, strange and unnatural, hanging over the market like a storm waiting to break. Her voice was cracked, worn by thirst, yet it carried an authority that didn't match her torn dress and broken sandals. The sound of my name rolled from her lips with a weight that pressed into my chest. I panicked. How could a stranger in rags know my name? For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard her. Perhaps the heat had tricked me, or the crowd had whispered and I imagined her lips forming my name. But no. Her eyes were locked onto mine, steady, unblinking, certain. She had spoken it aloud for all to hear, and the marketplace, the same noisy market I had known all my life, had fallen into unnatural quiet. My throat tightened. What did you say?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. She stepped closer, her frail body swaying but her gaze never faltering. With lips dry and cracked, she whispered again, softer this time, but every syllable struck me like a hammer. "You are your father's son." My chest clenched, my breath caught. My father's name had been buried for years, spoken only in whispers at night when my mother thought I was asleep. He had died long ago, leaving behind shadows instead of stories, rumors instead of truths. And yet, here stood a woman I had never met, wearing rags, carrying a basket, and she spoke of him as though she had known him better than I ever had. I took a step back. "Who are you?" I demanded. The words were sharper than I intended, fueled by fear more than anger. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "That is not the question, child. The question is, who are you?" The crowd around us had not resumed its noise. Eyes followed us, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. Some people bowed their heads as if in respect, others frowned with suspicion, but none dared to interrupt. I tried to steady my breathing, but the heat pressed harder, the weight of her words heavier than the basket I had carried for her. My father's shadow suddenly loomed in my mind, larger than it had in years. "My father is dead," I said at last, almost spitting the words as though rejecting them would free me. "He has been gone for many years." Her lips curled, not into a smile, but something sadder. "Dead in body, yes, but not in name. His name lives. It breathes in you." I shook my head, stumbling backward. This was madness. She was a beggar, a stranger. What did she know of my father? What did she know of me? And yet, the way she looked at me, the certainty in her eyes, it unsettled me more than any lie could. She reached for the basket at her feet, but instead of lifting it, she knelt beside it. Her trembling hands parted the maize and cassava, and from beneath them, she pulled out something small, wrapped in faded cloth. Slowly, deliberately, she placed it in my hands. My fingers unwrapped it, revealing a small medallion, bronze, aged with time. And on its face was a crest, a lion encircled by baobab branches. My knees nearly buckled. I had seen that crest before. Once long ago, on the chain my father had worn around his neck. As a boy, I had touched it, traced it with my fingers, not knowing its meaning. After his death, it had vanished. Yet here it was, reborn from the basket of a poor woman in the marketplace. How? My voice broke. How do you have this? She looked at me with those piercing eyes. Because it was never his alone. It belongs to the bloodline. It belongs to you. The words struck harder than the sun above us. My chest rose and fell in ragged breaths as I turned the medallion over in my hand. The crest glinted faintly, though the metal was dull with age. The lion's eyes seemed to stare back at me, alive, roaring in silence. I wanted to throw it away, to reject it. Yet my fingers refused to let go. Behind us, the whispers of the crowd grew louder. Someone muttered my father's name. Another voice gasped, "It cannot be." And another trembling said, "The blood has returned." I felt trapped, caught in a net of gazes and words I didn't understand. "I don't want this," I whispered harshly. "You're mistaken. I'm nobody." The woman leaned close, her breath warm against my ear despite the dust in the air. "That is what you believe. But the streets have watched you. The elders have waited. And now the name speaks again." Her hand clutched mine tightly, forcing the medallion into my palm. "You cannot run from who you are." I wanted to scream. I wanted to drop it all, the medallion, the basket, her words. But when I looked up, I saw the crowd, men, women, children, staring at me as if I had become something more than myself, something dangerous, something chosen. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, shaking my head, trying to free myself from her grip. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "My father is dead. He left nothing. He was nothing." Her grip only tightened, her eyes flared. "Nothing?" she repeated, her voice sharp, carrying through the silent street. "Your father was a man of great power, betrayed by those closest to him. His blood flows in you. His enemies will know it. His legacy will rise in you whether you accept it or not." The words cut into me. My body felt cold despite the blazing heat. A part of me wanted to believe her. Another part wanted to run as far as my legs could take me. And then, as if to carve her words into my soul, she said it again, louder, clearer, for all to hear. "You are your father's son." My chest tightened. My vision swam. My father's name was buried with him long ago, yet here, in the mouth of a beggar woman, it had returned to life. I could almost hear his voice echoing in my ears, a ghost rising from the grave. My father was dead. Long dead. Yet her words felt like truth I had hidden from all my life. And the silence of the market told me. Everyone else believed it too. When she lowered the basket to the ground, I expected only cassava and maize. That was what the weight had felt like. Food, the kind that kept families alive for a week, maybe two. But when her trembling hands pushed aside the layers of grain, I froze. Beneath the food lay a sealed envelope, its surface yellowed with time, marked with a crest pressed deep into wax. A lion encircled by baobab branches. The sight of it made my stomach twist. I had seen that crest once before, as a child, on the medallion my father wore. The woman's hands shook as she lifted the envelope, brushing the dust from its surface. The seal caught the sunlight, glinting like a small flame. She placed it in my hands, and for a moment, the market disappeared. The noise, the crowd, even the heat of the sun. All I could see was the lion's face staring back at me, fierce and unyielding. "Do not open it yet," she whispered, her eyes boring into mine. "Not until you are ready." My palms sweated against the thick paper. What is this? Why do you have it? Her gaze did not waver. It was meant for you, passed down through blood. Your father left more behind than silence, more than death. He left truth and burden. Her words struck hard, stirring something I had buried for years. My father's name had been whispered only in fragments, never in full. My mother had spoken of him little, always with sadness clouding her eyes. And now, here was a stranger pulling him from the grave with an envelope hidden beneath maize. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers like the hiss of fire through dry grass. The boy with the name has returned. I felt their stares. Some looked in awe, others with suspicion, but all of them carried something heavier than curiosity. It was as if the entire street had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for me. I shook my head. No, this cannot be real. My father is gone. He left nothing. The woman stepped closer, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Gone, yes, but not erased. His enemies still live, and they will hear of this before the sun sets. My heart pounded. Enemies? Of my father? He had been nothing more than a man swallowed by time, a name carried only in my blood. At least that was what I believed. But her certainty cracked that belief like glass. I looked down at the envelope again. The seal felt warm beneath my thumb, as if alive. Questions screamed in my mind. What did it contain? A letter? A map? A confession? Or perhaps a curse meant for me? The woman's eyes softened, but her voice carried urgency. You must choose, child. Either carry it or leave it. But once it is yours, there is no turning back. My throat went dry. Around us, the market had become a stage. Faces leaned forward, hungry for my answer. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of eyes not as curiosity, but as expectation. I wanted to run, to drop the envelope back into the basket and disappear into the crowd, pretend this had never happened. But my fingers refused to let go. The seal dug into my skin, anchoring me to it. The woman leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Your father's bloodline is not forgotten. The lion still roars. But beware. If you open this before your heart is strong, it will destroy you. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I clutched the envelope tighter, as though afraid it would vanish if I loosened my grip. The whispers in the crowd swelled. The sun has returned. The lion walks again. I looked around, dizzy, desperate for escape. Men were staring too intently, women clutching their children as if to shield them. And in the shadows beyond the stalls, I noticed figures watching, silent, still, their eyes glinting like blades. The woman followed my gaze, and her expression hardened. She squeezed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin, pulling me back into the moment. Her voice was sharp, urgent, almost trembling. Listen carefully. If you stay here, they will come for you tonight. Her grip burned into my wrist as her words echoed in my skull. They will come for you tonight. The crowd's whispers felt like a prophecy, their eyes a prison. The envelope in my hand pulsed with danger, its seal unbroken, yet already changing my fate. I wanted to drop it, to run, to scream. But deep inside, I knew it was already too late. The hunt had begun. Fear has a smell. It is sharp and bitter, like dust after the first rain. That afternoon, as the woman clutched my wrist and whispered her warning, I smelled it. It hit me even before I saw them. The men stepping out of the alleys, moving with purpose, dressed not like traders or villagers, but in pressed dark suits that looked unnatural in the marketplace. They did not belong here, yet their presence bent the air around them. Their eyes scanned the street until they landed on me. Recognition flickered there, and my stomach dropped. The woman stiffened. Without hesitation, she dropped her basket again, maize scattering across the dust like frightened birds. The crowd gasped, then erupted into chaos as children dove for the food. The distraction was deliberate. She gripped my arm with surprising force and yanked me forward. We ran. The alleys of the market twisted like a labyrinth. Stalls leaned into each other. Ropes of dried fish dangled overhead. Bolts of Ankara fabric flapped in the wind, like flags. I stumbled over a loose stone, but the woman never slowed. Her thin frame cut through the crowd with the precision of someone who had run these paths her whole life. Behind us, I heard them. The sharp crunch of leather shoes against dust. The low bark of orders in an accent that did not belong to this land. They were not locals. Their foreignness was carved into their very presence. Stiff backs, clipped words, and the hunger of predators who had finally scented their prey. "Why are they following us?" I gasped, barely able to keep pace. My chest burned, my legs screamed, but the woman's grip pulled me onward. "Not following," she spat between breaths. "Hunting." Her words sliced through me. Hunting. The realization hit hard. These men weren't chasing us for curiosity. They knew exactly who I was. Or worse, who I was supposed to be. We burst into a narrow lane lined with clay walls, the air thick with the scent of roasting groundnuts. Women carrying baskets stepped aside quickly, their eyes widening as they noticed the men in suits pushing through behind us. Whispers rose again. "The boy with the name." The woman's pace was relentless. For someone so frail, she ran with the fury of survival, dragging me past stalls of smoked tilapia, piles of yams, and woven mats that blurred as we flew by. My lungs begged for air, but fear was stronger than exhaustion. The pounding footsteps behind us grew louder. Shouts echoed off the walls, commands in a tongue I didn't recognize. One voice, deep and commanding, cut through the chaos. "Don't lose him!" Every hair on my neck stood on end. They weren't after her. They were after me. We turned another corner. The marketplace thinned into an open courtyard where chickens scattered wildly at our arrival. I slipped, nearly falling, but she yanked me upright. "Keep moving," she hissed. I glanced back. The men were closer now, their suits coated with dust, their eyes fixed on me with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. One of them reached beneath his jacket, and for a flash I saw the glint of metal. My breath hitched. Guns. "Why me?" I shouted, panic rising. "I don't even know who they are." The woman didn't look back. "Because you carry his name. That is enough." Her words cracked open something inside me. I thought of my father again, the silence around his memory, the medallion I had seen as a boy, the whispers my mother never finished. All of it was rushing back, crashing into me as though the past had been waiting for this exact moment to demand its due. We ducked into another alley, this one darker, narrower. Cloth canopies above us blocked the sun, casting everything in dim orange glow. My shoulder slammed against a wall, pain shooting down my arm, but the woman dragged me forward without pause. The noise of pursuit was relentless. Boots striking earth, voices calling, the echo of power closing in. And then suddenly, the path ended. A dead-end alley. I froze, my chest heaving, my legs trembling. "We're trapped!" I cried. The woman scanned the walls quickly, desperate. Her eyes darted to a stack of crates, but they were too high for us to climb in time. My pulse thundered in my ears as the sound of footsteps grew louder. "They're coming," I whispered, my voice breaking. The woman turned to me, her face etched with urgency, with a fear she could not hide. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, do not let go of the envelope. Do you hear me? Do not let it go." I nodded, clutching the sealed paper in my hand as though it were my very heartbeat. The footsteps filled the alley. Shadows stretched long as the men appeared, filling the narrow entrance. Their suits looked darker here, almost like the feathers of vultures. Their leader stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes sharp as knives. "Well," he said, his accent thick but his words clear, The lion's cub has returned." The others chuckled, low and cruel. The woman pushed me behind her, her frail frame squaring against men who looked carved from stone. For a moment I saw not a beggar, but a warrior, aged, weary, but unbroken. "Leave him," she said firmly. "He is not ready." The leader smiled, though it never touched his eyes. Whether ready or not, the blood cannot hide. He raised his hand. At the signal, one of the men stepped forward. My eyes caught the motion as he reached into his coat. My stomach knotted, dread flooding through me. A second later, the gleam of steel appeared. A gun. I staggered back, the alley spinning around me. At its end, the cold barrel of a pistol pressed firmly against my chest. My pulse hammered so hard, I thought it would explode. The woman gasped, whispering a prayer under her breath, and I realized, with terrifying clarity, I was seconds away from learning why my father's name was worth killing for. Death had been so close, I could feel its shadow breathing against my skin. I braced for the shot. The cold barrel of the gun pressed hard against my chest, my heartbeat thundering like drums at a funeral. But instead of darkness, I found myself stepping into a house hidden behind the alleys, a house that smelled of wood smoke and history, its walls adorned with masks carved from ebony and adorned with cowrie shells. The place seemed alive. Rows of ancestral carvings lined the shelves, their hollow eyes staring at me as though they recognized me. In the center of the room, elders sat in a circle, their robes made of Ankara cloth shimmering with deep reds, blues, and golds. The poor woman who had dragged me through the market now stepped forward with quiet authority, and to my shock, they all rose to their feet. "Mother Nia," they greeted in unison, bowing their heads. The beggar woman I thought I had known was no beggar at all. She was a guardian, and this was her house of masks. I froze in the doorway, my body stiff with disbelief. Only moments ago, she had seemed frail, vulnerable, mocked by the market crowd. Now, as she stood tall in the circle of elders, I saw her differently. Her tattered scarf looked like a crown in this place, her weathered hands like those of a keeper of secrets. One of the elders, a man with silver hair and eyes sharp as a hawk's, motioned for me to sit. I lowered myself onto a woven mat, the smell of palm oil lamps heavy in the air. The rhythmic sound of drums, somewhere in the distance, pulsed through the walls, as if the house itself beat with a heart. Mother Nia raised her hand, silencing the murmurs. "The lion's blood has returned," she said, just as it was foretold. The elders nodded gravely. My skin prickled. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice breaking under the weight of the moment. "Why do you speak of me as though I am someone else?" An old woman leaned forward, her wrists heavy with beaded bracelets that clinked softly. "Because you are not just yourself, child. You are the son of a man who shaped destinies." They spoke of my father. Piece by piece, their words painted him in colors I had never seen. A man of wealth, respected in the city. A leader who carried the lion's crest not just on his chest, but in his soul. But alongside the honor came betrayal. "He was destroyed by those closest to him," one elder said bitterly. "Blood betrayed blood. His enemies wore smiles in the day and daggers at night." I felt my fists clench, anger and sorrow colliding in my chest. For so long, I had believed my father to be nothing but a name swallowed by silence. Now, here they were, strangers, telling me he had been more than I could imagine. Mother Nia's gaze found mine. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with truth. "Your father's fall was not his alone. It was the breaking of a legacy, the scattering of trust. And now it is you who must choose whether the lion sleeps or roars again." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. I never knew him. How can I carry what I do not know?" Her hand lifted slowly, trembling yet steady with purpose. She reached into her basket, the same basket I had carried through the market, heavy with secrets, and pulled out the envelope once more. The seal stared at me, unbroken, the lion encircled by baobab branches. It pulsed in the dim light, alive with meaning I could not yet grasp. "This," she whispered, "is the truth your father left behind. It holds names, betrayals, promises written in his own hand. But once opened, there is no return." My heart pounded. I remembered the whispers in the market, the men in suits, the gun pressed to my chest. Every thread led back to this fragile piece of paper in my palm. The elders began to chant softly, a rhythm like waves crashing against the shore. Their voices rose and fell, weaving around me, filling the room with something ancient, something that stirred my very bones. Mother Nia pressed the envelope into my palm, her grip firm, her eyes burning with urgency. "Your enemies wear fine suits," she said, her voice low but cutting like a blade. "They sit in high places, drinking from cups filled with the blood of the betrayed. They already know you live, and they will not stop until either you fall or you rise." The words pierced me. I looked down at the envelope, its seal digging into my skin. My father's name pulsed through me like fire, awakening questions, fears, and a destiny I was not ready for. I wanted to scream that I was just an ordinary man, no lion, no leader. But as the elders' chants grew louder, the truth settled like iron in my chest. My ordinary life had ended the moment she spoke my name in the marketplace. Mother Nia's hand lingered over mine, her whisper colder than the shadows outside. "Your enemies wear fine suits." The elders' chants swelled, the masks on the walls staring down like silent witnesses. And in that moment, with the sealed envelope burning in my palm, I realized I wasn't just hunted. I was already inside the war my father had left behind. The lion crest seemed to roar at me from the seal, its mane wild, its teeth bared, daring me to break the wax and uncover its meaning. The baobab branches that circled it looked less like leaves and more like chains, binding the beast in silence. My palms sweated. My breath came shallow. When I finally cracked the seal and unfolded the thick paper, the room fell into silence. The elders stopped their chanting. Mother Nia leaned forward, her eyes locked on me. And there, inside the envelope, lay more than words. It was my father's hidden world. The first document was a deed. Thick parchment stamped with seals I didn't recognize. Names of towns I had only heard whispered on bus rides. Land. Vast acres of fertile ground. Riverside property. Oil fields. My fingers traced the ink, the signatures bold and deliberate. I flipped to the next. Maps. Carefully drawn, outlining routes through forests and valleys, connecting villages to cities, borders to capitals. Some routes were marked with red, others with black. A code, perhaps, or warnings my father had left behind. Then photographs, faded black and white pictures that smelled of dust and time. My father stood tall in them, dressed in fine African suits, his lion crest pinned proudly to his chest. But he was not alone. Men stood beside him, some smiling, some stiff with pride. And yet, as I turned each photo, I felt unease grow inside me. Because among those men, I recognized faces. Faces I had seen in newspapers. Faces carved into billboards across the city. Men who now sat in parliament, in banks, in corporations. They were not just leaders. They were the country's power itself. And once, they had stood beside my father. Mother Nia's voice broke the silence. They betrayed him. When he refused to give them everything, when he placed honor before greed, they destroyed him. His riches were scattered, his name buried, his child hidden. Her eyes met mine with intensity that burned. You are that child. You are heir to this wealth, to this legacy. But know this. What makes you heir also makes you target. The words struck me like thunder. My fingers trembled against the photographs. Each paper I touched seemed heavier than the last. These were not just documents. They were proof that my father had outsmarted his enemies, hiding riches they never found. And now, by placing them in my hands, Mother Nia had pulled me into the storm he left behind. I whispered, "Why me? Why now?" She stepped closer, her frail hand pressing against mine. "Because you are grown. Because they believe the bloodline is broken. But the lion's crest is not just symbol. It is inheritance. And once it is revealed, those who betrayed him will come for you with claws sharpened." Her words made the room shrink around me. I stared at the deeds, the maps, the photographs, and I saw not just opportunity but danger. My father's legacy was power, and power, in the wrong eyes, was death. The elders nodded solemnly, their voices low and grave. "The lion roars again," one whispered. "The cub must learn to fight." I wanted to reject it, to throw the papers into the fire, to scream that I was no lion's heir, just a man who stumbled into a market to help a woman carry her basket. But the crest on every page, the sharp eyes of my father in every photograph, told me there was no escape. My hands shook so badly the papers almost slipped. I forced them back into the envelope, clutching it against my chest like a shield. My pulse pounded in my ears, and for a moment I thought I could hear the faint sound of a lion's roar, deep and distant, echoing through my bones. Mother Nia's face softened. She placed her other hand over mine, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Courage, child. Do not fear the weight. It was always meant for you." But even as she spoke, a sound shattered the fragile stillness, the sharp crack of stone against glass. The window exploded inward, shards scattering across the floor. The elders cried out, rising to their feet. Dust swirled in the air as the envelope slipped from my hands. Mother Nia grabbed my arm, her eyes blazing with urgency. "They have found us," she hissed. And in that instant, as the night air howled through the broken window, I realized the House of Masks was no longer a sanctuary. It was a trap under siege. Flames lit the sky before I even heard the first shot. The safe house that had been filled with chants and whispers only moments ago now shook with chaos. Armed men stormed the walls, their boots pounding like war drums, their rifles spitting fire into the night. The villagers outside, men, women, even children, rushed forward with nothing but stones, sticks, and courage. Their shouts rose into the smoke, desperate, determined, a human wall against machines of death. Their sacrifice bought us precious seconds, a heartbeat of time in which Mother Nia shoved the basket back into my arms. It felt heavier than before, as though the papers and medallion within had absorbed the weight of destiny itself. "Run!" she barked, her frail voice sharp as iron. The air was thick with smoke, stinging my eyes until tears streamed down my cheeks. I coughed violently, the bitter taste of burning wood coating my tongue. The House of Masks groaned as flames spread across the roof, crackling like the laughter of demons. Gunshots tore through the night, each one a thunderclap that rattled my bones. The elders shouted prayers in unison, their voices trembling yet defiant, echoing into the dark. Some grabbed spears from the walls, ancestral weapons against modern rifles, their faces set in grim resolve. Mother Nia pulled me by the arm toward the back wall, her strength impossible for her age. She pressed her palm against a carved panel, the mask of a lion, and with a grinding sound, a hidden door opened. Cold air rushed from within, carrying the smell of earth and history. "A tunnel," I gasped, staring into the darkness. "Carved by those who prepared for betrayal generations ago," she said quickly. "It is the lion's last path." We plunged inside. The tunnel swallowed us whole, the fire's glow fading behind as dirt walls pressed close around us. My lungs burned with the smoke I had inhaled, but the cool dampness of the underground air soothed me enough to stumble forward. The basket thudded against my ribs with every step, its weight a constant reminder of what I carried. The ground beneath was uneven, carved stone and packed red earth. Torches mounted on the walls flickered weakly, throwing long shadows that stretched like claws. The sound of gunfire above became muffled, replaced by the pounding of my heart and the echo of our footsteps. Mother Nia's voice came from the darkness ahead, firm despite her ragged breaths. "Do not falter now. The tunnel remembers only the strong." I wanted to protest, to ask how long, to demand why my life had suddenly turned into a battlefield of fire and blood. But all I could do was run, my legs burning, my chest heaving, my mind whirling with images of the villagers outside throwing stones against bullets. The tunnel twisted, narrow and endless. Once I stumbled over a root that jutted from the wall, nearly dropping the basket. My fingers clutched it desperately, terrified it would spill its secrets into the dirt. Mother Nia slowed just enough to glance back, her eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. "That basket is more than paper, child. It is the memory of your father, the map of our people, the key to our survival. Lose it, and we are finished." Her words sliced into me like fire. I nodded silently, my throat too dry to speak. Minutes felt like hours as we pressed deeper underground. The tunnel grew tighter, forcing us to duck beneath low arches. My shoulders scraped against the dirt walls, the scent of damp clay filling my nose. And then, faintly, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to us. Boots, echoing behind us. "They've found the tunnel," I whispered, panic surging. Mother Nia's face tightened, but she did not stop. "Then we must move faster." We pushed harder, our footsteps slapping against stone, our breaths ragged. The echoes grew louder, closer, until I could hear voices. Low, sharp, speaking in that same foreign accent I had heard in the market. The tunnel curved sharply, and for the first time, a faint glow appeared ahead. Moonlight. A way out. My chest lifted with hope. We stumbled toward it, our pace reckless, the basket slamming painfully against my ribs. The voices behind us grew clearer. A shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space, and sparks burst from the wall beside me. I flinched, almost dropping the basket again, but Mother Nia shoved me forward. "Do not stop," she cried. The light grew brighter, the tunnel widening until at last we emerged into the night air. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, the stars above blurred by smoke and tears. My lungs ached, my ears still ringing from the gunfire. But we were outside. We had escaped. Or so I thought. Because waiting on the dirt road that led into the forest were vehicles, black SUVs, their polished surfaces reflecting the moonlight like the eyes of predators. Their engines hummed low, patient, deadly, and in the glow of their headlights, figures stepped out, men in the same dark suits, their rifles already raised. The cool night air felt colder than steel as the headlights blinded me. Black SUVs blocked the road, armed men pouring out like shadows with guns gleaming in their hands. Mother Nia grabbed my shoulder, her nails biting into my skin. "They were waiting for us," she whispered. And as the forest fell silent around us, I realized escape had only led us straight into their jaws. Wealth dresses like silk, but its teeth are sharper than knives. I learned that truth the night we were captured. One moment, the forest road was filled with headlights and rifles. The next, my arms were bound, and the basket was ripped from my chest. They dragged us into black SUVs, whose leather seats smelled of perfume and fear. When the doors opened again, I was no longer in the dust of the village. I stood in a world I had never touched, a sprawling African estate, its gates carved with ivory lions, its chandeliers glittering like constellations overhead. The floor beneath my knees was marble, polished until it shone like water. And around a long polished table sat men in dark suits. Their faces were familiar. I had seen them in newspapers, on billboards, shaking hands with presidents, the board members of Nkosi Bank. But their eyes, sharp and hungry, were not the eyes of builders. They were predators. They did not greet us. They did not ask who we were. They already knew. One of them, tall, with a gold ring that flashed on his finger, leaned forward, his voice smooth as honey but cold as stone. "So the lion's cub has returned at last." Another chuckled, the sound thick with mockery. "Dragged into the light by a beggar woman." His eyes cut toward Mother Nia with disdain. "Tell me, Mother of Dust, did you really think you could hide him from us forever?" Mother Nia stood straighter, even with ropes around her wrists. Her voice was steady, regal. "I hid him not from you, but from his destiny, and destiny has found him, whether you like it or not." Their laughter echoed across the chandelier-lit hall. I clenched my fists, anger simmering beneath my fear. These were the men who once stood beside my father in those photographs. Now they sneered at me as though I was dirt beneath their shoes. The man with the gold ring slammed his palm against the table, silencing the others. His eyes locked onto mine, cold and sharp. "Boy, you carry the crest. You hold deeds, maps, proof of lands and riches that belong to this council. They were your father's, but he was one of us. His legacy is ours by right." I shook my head, voice trembling. "He hid them from you. He never trusted you." The man's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "That is why he died." My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. They were admitting it without shame, that they had betrayed him, destroyed him, and now they wanted me to sign away what little he left behind. Another board member, his suit a shimmering blue silk, leaned across the table. His breath smelled of wine. "Don't waste our time. You have two choices. Sign away your bloodline, surrender the crest, and we will let you live. Refuse, and you will be buried before dawn." Mother Nia's eyes darted to me, fierce and unflinching. She said nothing, but her silence roared louder than any words. She was daring me to resist, to carry the fire my father had carried. The man in silk placed a document before me, sliding a gold pen across the table. "Sign, child," he hissed. "End this game before it ends you." I stared at the paper. My hands trembled. The crest glared at me from the top of the document, stamped in red wax. Lines of words blurred before my eyes. Contracts binding lands, properties, accounts. Everything my father had hidden. They wanted it all. My mind raced. If I signed, I would betray my father's memory. I would hand them the very wealth they killed for. But if I refused, if I defied them, then the barrel of a gun would greet me again. This time, without mercy. Mother Nia shifted slightly, her wrists straining against the ropes. Her gaze pierced through me. In her eyes I read a command without words. "Do not bend." But fear clawed at me. The marble floor felt cold beneath my knees. The men's laughter buzzed in my ears. The gold pen glistened like a snake, ready to strike. One of the board members rose from his chair, his shadow stretching long across the table. He leaned close, his lips almost at my ear, his words dripping with venom. "Sign away your bloodline," he whispered, "or bury it tonight." My heart thundered, my hands trembling above the paper. The gold pen gleamed in the chandelier's light, a dagger disguised as ink. The council's eyes bore into me, hungry, expectant. And then, across the polished table, Mother Nia's gaze locked with mine, daring me in silence to resist, even if it meant death. Sometimes survival hides in the humblest places. As the gold pen glinted in my trembling fingers, I knew one wrong move would end my bloodline. The council's eyes bored into me, their polished suits disguising hunger sharper than any blade. But beneath the polished table, my hand brushed against something rough, the woven basket. Still there, half forgotten in the corner where they had tossed it aside. And in that instant, I remembered what Mother Nia had told me. That basket is more than paper, child. It is the memory of your father, the key to survival. I slid my fingers through the layers of cassava, yams, and folded clothes. And there, hidden beneath the food of the poor, was another secret. A crest, identical to the one they demanded, but older, worn smooth by generations of hands. My heart stopped. The basket was her shield all along, a disguise for legacies in plain sight. I glanced up quickly. The council was impatient. The man with the gold ring tapped the table, his eyes narrowing. "What are you waiting for, boy?" "Sign." Mother Nia stood tall, even in her ropes, her silence steady as stone. She had placed the choice in my hands, and I felt the weight of centuries pressing down on me. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the basket, pretending to steady myself. My fingers wrapped around the worn crest, rough and cold. At that moment, an idea struck me. Dangerous, desperate, but the only chance we had. I pulled the newer crest halfway out of my pocket, letting its edge glimmer just enough for them to see. Gasps echoed around the table, their greedy eyes widening. They leaned forward, their hunger obvious, their focus locked on the prize they had chased for years. And in that distraction, beneath the table, my other hand clutched the older crest from the basket. Smooth, ancient, invisible to their eyes. The man in the silk suit barked, "Place it here!" He slammed the document with his fist. "Seal your bloodline to us, and you will live." I feigned hesitation, sweat dripping down my brow, my breathing uneven. With trembling hands, I swapped the crests, the polished one hidden now against my chest, the older decoy clutched between my fingers. The leader with the gold ring smirked as I slowly extended my hand. "At last," he hissed. "The lion's legacy bends to us." The room held its breath. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop swaying. I pressed the old crest onto the red wax seal of the contract. The mark was faint, incomplete, but it was enough to convince them. They erupted into laughter, their voices bouncing off the marble walls like the jeers of jackals. One clapped his hands. Finally, the boy has bent. Another raised his glass of wine, toasting mockingly. "To the death of resistance." But beneath the table, Mother Nia's bound hand brushed against mine. Her grip was fierce, her nails digging into my skin. Her eyes met mine across the table, sharp, burning, alive. And then, under her breath so low that only I heard, she whispered, "Run now." My chest tightened. They believed they had won. But in truth, the true crest, the one they needed, the one my father had protected, pulsed like fire against my chest. The council roared with triumph, raising glasses and clapping, hands blind in their greed. The leader smirked, leaning back in his chair. "The boy has surrendered." But beneath the table, her hand squeezed mine hard, her whisper slicing through the noise, "Run now." And as my pulse thundered, I realized the game had only just begun. Destiny returns you to where it began. The dust, the cries of hawkers, the smell of roasted groundnuts and smoked tilapia, the marketplace where I had first lifted a stranger's basket. Only this time, I was not invisible. Every step I took drew whispers, stares, and pointed fingers. Mother Nia walked beside me, her back straighter than I had ever seen, her rags transformed into robes of authority. She stopped at the market square where elders sold yams and children darted between stalls, and with a voice that cut through the din, she called out my name. The crowd froze. Conversations stuttered into silence. Traders left their stalls unattended. Even the goats bleated and scattered as if sensing the storm that was about to break. "You all know this name," she declared, her voice trembling but strong. "The son of Kofi Mensa has returned." The name hit the air like thunder gasps, spread through the crowd, like fire catching dry grass. People who had once ignored me now stared with wide eyes. Old men whispered, clutching their walking sticks. Mothers drew their children close, as though history itself had stepped into flesh before them. I shifted uneasily, my palms slick with sweat. The crest pressed against my chest, its weight heavier now that hundreds of eyes bore into me. "He is the rightful heir," Mother Nia continued, raising her frail arms high. "Betrayed by those who sat at the table of power, his father's wealth, his father's land, his father's name, stolen by liars in suits. But today, truth walks among us." The crowd erupted. Cries of anger, shouts of betrayal. Traders abandoned their goods, raising fists into the sky. Women ululated, their voices piercing, carrying grief and fury across the market. "Those bankers!" a man shouted from the back, his voice hoarse with rage. "They bled us dry, took our farms, our savings." "They killed our brothers," another roared, his machete raised high. The air vibrated with fury. The marketplace transformed from a place of trade into a place of reckoning. But it was not only the people who had heard. Men in dark suits moved swiftly through the crowd, their radios crackling, their eyes sharp with purpose. They shoved through the throng, weapons glinting beneath their jackets. Mother Nia stepped closer to me, her voice low but urgent. "Stand tall. Do not bend. Not now. The people must see you strong." My knees trembled, but I forced myself upright. My father's name echoed in the chants now rising around me. "Kofi's son. The heir has returned." The men in suits pushed harder, trying to silence the voices, but the crowd resisted. A trader hurled a basket of tomatoes at one of them, the fruit splattering across his fine jacket. Laughter rippled, followed by defiance. Soon the marketplace became chaos. Wooden stalls overturned. Women wielded pestles like spears. Young men lifted stones, hurling them against the invaders. The air filled with dust, shouts, and the sound of resistance. I stood frozen in the middle of it all, the basket clutched against me. I could hardly breathe. Destiny had dragged me into the storm, and now there was no way out. Mother Nia's voice rang in my ear. "The lion's heir must roar, or the people will scatter." I lifted the crest high above my head. Its golden face caught the sunlight, flashing like fire. The crowd roared back. "The heir! The heir! The heir!" For a brief, impossible moment, I felt the power of unity, of history, of truth binding me to these people. It surged through my veins like lightning, steadying my breath, turning fear into flame. But power always attracts bullets. Through the chaos, the leader of the board emerged, his silk suit unruffled despite the dust, his gold ring flashing as he shoved aside both ally and enemy. His face curled into a smirk, his eyes cold and merciless. He drew a gun from his jacket with the ease of a man who had done so many times before. The metallic click of its chamber silenced the crowd faster than any chant. Mothers pulled their children back. Men with stones lowered their arms. Even the goats quieted. The gun's black barrel found my chest. The marketplace fell into a silence so deep I could hear my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The leader's smirk widened as he steadied his aim. "You will bury your father's name today," he hissed. And as the crowd held its breath, I felt the weight of destiny pressing harder than the barrel pointed at my heart. One gunshot can end a life, but it cannot end a legacy. The sound split the marketplace like lightning through dry branches. For a heartbeat, I thought it was the end, that my chest had been pierced, that the story of my bloodline would die before it even began. But then, I saw him. A young man, no older than 20, his shirt torn, his bare feet caked with dust. He had leapt forward in the instant the gun roared. The bullet struck his chest, the force flinging him backward. His body hit the ground with a sickening thud, blood spreading fast across the red earth. He had not known me, yet he gave his life for me. The crowd screamed. Mothers wailed, clutching their children. Old men slammed their walking sticks into the ground in fury. But through the chaos, Mother Nia's eyes found mine. They brimmed with tears, but they burned with fire too. And they told me what her lips did not. Do not falter. The leader of the bankers stood tall, his pistol still smoking, his gold ring glinting under the sun. His smirk was cruel, the kind of smile worn by men who believe they own not just land and money, but lives. To him, the villager's death was nothing, just another life crushed beneath the boots of power. But to the crowd, it was everything. The man's blood was more than blood. It was fuel. It ignited the fury buried deep in their chests. I gripped the crest and raised it high, the lion blazing in the sunlight. My voice cracked as it tore from my throat, but it carried across the square. I am the son of Kofi Mensa. The name thundered across the marketplace. It was a spark in dry grass. The people roared in answer. The heir, Kofi's son. The chants rolled like waves, growing louder, angrier, unstoppable. The market that only hours ago was filled with bargaining, laughter, and gossip had become a battlefield. Men armed with machetes surged forward. Women hurled stones, pestles, and even clay pots. Children screamed war cries, kicking and clawing at the suited guards. The very stalls that once sold cassava and maize became barricades of resistance. The guards tried to hold their ground, rifles raised, shouting commands in foreign tongues. But the fury of the people was greater than their guns. Bullets tore into the crowd, yet the people did not scatter. Each fallen villager birthed 10 more who rushed forward, fueled by rage. Dust rose like a storm, mixing with smoke as stalls burned. The air was thick with the smell of blood, sweat, and fire. I stood in the heart of it all, trembling but unyielding, the crest glowing in my hand. Mother Nia's voice rang above the chaos, her frail figure somehow towering over the mob. "Blood for blood," she cried, her voice cracking yet carrying like thunder. "They took our sons. They stole our land. They killed our lion, but his cub has returned." The chant took root. Blood for blood. Blood for blood. The marketplace shook with the rhythm of stomping feet. The chant became a drumbeat, steady, furious, unstoppable. The bankers faltered. Their silk suits, once symbols of power, were torn and stained. Their polished shoes slipped in the mud of spilt palm oil and blood. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. The leader raised his pistol again, his smirk replaced with desperation. His shot cracked into the air, grazing the ear of a man beside me. But the crowd did not yield. They pressed forward like the tide, drowning the guards, swallowing the bankers. The SUVs that had once gleamed with wealth now shook as villagers leapt onto their hoods, smashing windshields with stones. Tires were slashed. Flames licked the doors. The leader shouted orders, his voice shrill, cracking with panic. His guards dragged him back, their rifles firing wildly, bullets tearing through fruit stalls and clay pots. But the people did not retreat. A woman, her baby tied to her back, swung a wooden pestle at a guard, knocking him to the ground. A boy no older than 12 hurled a bottle that shattered against a car, flames erupting. The market had become a war zone, and the people were no longer afraid. I raised the crest again, the lion flashing like fire in the Akwawe, dust-filled sunlight. My voice tore through the air. This blood will not be forgotten. My father's name will not die. The people answered with a roar that shook my bones. The leader, pale and frantic now, stumbled toward his SUV. His smirk was gone. His confidence shattered. He fired one last desperate shot into the crowd, then vanished into the vehicle. Engines roared, tires screeched. The convoy of bankers sped away, chased by stones, shouts, and fire. And then, silence. Only smoke remained, curling into the sky. Stalls lay broken, fruit scattered across the ground, blood soaking into the dust. The young villager's body lay still, his eyes wide open, his chest unmoving. Women knelt over their fallen, wailing. Men stood in stunned silence, gripping machetes still wet with blood. Mother Nia stepped forward, her eyes red, her shoulders trembling, yet her voice steady. "You didn't falter. she whispered to me. The lion's air roared today. But my chest ached. My eyes burned with tears. This was not victory. It was only the opening wound of a war. The people turned their eyes toward me. Not one or two, but hundreds. Eyes filled with grief, rage, and hope. They did not see me as a stranger anymore. They saw me as something far heavier, a leader. And in that silence, heavy and suffocating, I knew the truth. The fight was only beginning. The market lay in ruins, smoke curling where stalls once stood. The people stared at me, their eyes demanding what came next. Mother Nia's whisper cut through the silence. This was only their first strike. The storm is still coming. And as I looked at the crest blazing in my hand, I knew she was right. The true war had only begun. I walked again on the street where it began. The same red earth beneath my feet, the same cries of hawkers in the air, the same smells of roasted maize and frying tilapia swirling together. Yet nothing was the same. I carried no basket this time, but I carried destiny. The sun burned overhead, but its light felt different, as though it had chosen me to walk beneath it. People turned to look as I passed. Some bowed their heads, others whispered. Mothers pulled children close, telling them in low tones, "That is Kofi's son." Beside me, the poor woman who had first staggered beneath the weight of a basket no longer looked poor at all. Her rags, though unchanged, shimmered now like robes of dignity. Her spine was straight, her eyes clear, her steps steady. The marketplace that once ignored her now parted to let her walk through. I slowed my pace, my chest tightening with questions that had gnawed at me since the fire, the council, the blood. Finally, I turned to her. "Tell me your true name," I asked. She stopped in the middle of the street. The crowd paused with her, all eyes drawn to the frail figure who had carried me into this storm. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, a smile curved across her face, gentle, tired, yet filled with power. "I am your father's oath." The words sank into me like stones into water. I frowned, struggling to grasp them. "Oath?" She nodded. "Your father knew his blood would be hunted, his wealth stolen, his legacy twisted by wolves. He swore an oath before the ancestors that his heir would rise, not through gold, but through truth. That oath became me. I am not only flesh, boy. I vow. I promise. I am the guardian of your destiny." Her voice carried not just through me, but through the market. The hawkers stopped calling prices. The goats ceased bleating. The children stilled, eyes wide. Her words had transformed the noise into reverence. I wanted to ask more, to press her for answers, but she only smiled again. Her hand, frail yet strong, reached for mine. She placed the crest into my palm, its lion gleaming faintly as though it too heard her words. "The people have seen you," she whispered. "Now you must see yourself." Before I could speak, she let go, and just like that, she turned and faded into the crowd. No one stopped her. No one touched her. She disappeared among traders and mothers, swallowed by the same marketplace where she had once been invisible. I clutched the crest tightly, my heart heavy. The market began to buzz again. Bargains resumed. Children darted between stalls. Vendors shouted prices as though nothing had changed. But I felt the shift, an undercurrent in the air, invisible yet undeniable. And then it came. A whisper. My name. It started with one trader, his lips trembling as he spoke it. Mensa's son. Then another. And another. Until the whisper rolled like thunder across the market. The sound grew, yet with it grew silence. Because every time my name was spoken, the noise of trade dimmed. Until the only sound left was the name itself, echoing again and again. Mensa's son. The heir. The lion's blood. I froze. My breath caught. My heart pounded. The silence was not emptiness. It was weight. It was power. It was destiny pressing down on me from every direction. For the first time since this began, I understood. It was no longer about the crest, the papers, the wealth hidden by my father. It was about the people, about their faith, their trust, their blood spilled into the red earth for me. I looked down at the crest in my hand. The lion roared silently, its mane encircled by the branches of the baobab. It was no longer just my father's mark. It was mine. Mother Nia's words echoed in my ears, though she was gone. The people have seen you. Now you must see yourself. I raised the crest high once more, my arm trembling under its weight, not of metal, but of expectation. The marketplace bowed into silence. Men lowered their heads. Women crossed their arms over their chests. Even the children stopped moving. And in that stillness, I knew the truth. The world had only just begun to call me into my destiny. The whispers of my name spread beyond the marketplace, rolling like waves toward the horizon. The crest burned in my palm, not as a symbol of inheritance, but as a torch that would light a long, dangerous road ahead. I lifted my eyes to the sky, my chest heavy, yet steady. And as silence deepened once more, I realized the world had only just begun to call me into my destiny. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice keeps these tales alive. Don't forget to like and share so others can feel this journey too. And if you want more powerful African stories of destiny, betrayal, and hope, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. The next tale is already waiting for you. If this story moved you, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every word. Don't forget to like and share so more people can feel this journey too. And if you enjoy stories filled with suspense and emotion, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell to never miss the next one.